My name is Scarlett. I'm 32 years old and a single mother to my precious 5-year-old twins, Lily and Lucas. I never imagined needing emergency gallbladder surgery while having no one to care for my children. The day my parents chose a concert over helping me during a medical crisis changed everything. Their words still echo in my mind, "You're such a burden." But that moment transformed our relationship forever in ways none of us expected. Let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button to see how I taught my parents a lesson they'll never forget. Life as a single mother of twins in Portland, Oregon isn't easy, but I've always made it work. For the past 10 years, I've built my career as a pediatric nurse practitioner at Northwest Children's Hospital, where I care for sick children every day. The irony of ending up in a hospital bed myself wasn't lost on me. My journey as a single parent began when my ex-husband James walked out when Lily and Lucas were just 8 months old. He decided that parenthood was too restricting and moved across the country to New York with his personal trainer. The divorce was quick but painful, leaving me to figure out how to raise 2 babies alone while maintaining my career. A typical day for me starts at 5:30 in the morning. I get myself ready first, then wake the twins at 6:15 to start our morning routine. Breakfast, teeth, brushing hair, combing, and getting dressed all happen in a carefully choreographed sequence that I've perfected over the years. We're out the door by 7:20 to drop the twins at Sunshine Kindergarten before I rush to make my 8 o'clock shift at the hospital. My support system has always been minimal. My parents Margaret and William Thompson live just 30 minutes away in a spacious suburban home, perfect for grandchildren to visit. But they've kept their distance from the beginning. Our relationship has always been complicated. My parents raised me with high expectations and little emotional warmth. Everything was about appearances and achievements. When I announced my pregnancy 6 years ago, their first concern was what people would think about me having twins before my 30th birthday, not my happiness or well-being. "You're throwing away your career for motherhood," my mother said disapprovingly when I told her I was expecting. And with James, we never thought he was stable enough. She turned out to be right about James, but her criticism didn't help during that vulnerable time. When the twins were born and James left, my parents offered financial help but minimal hands-on support. They'd visit occasionally, bringing expensive gifts, but staying only an hour or two. They never offered to babysit or help during illnesses or school holidays. Meanwhile, they continued their active social life as music enthusiasts, attending at least one major concert every month and taking several international trips a year to see performers around the world. Their social media pages were filled with smiling photos from VIP sections and backstage passes while I struggled to find reliable childcare for hospital shifts. Last Christmas, I asked if they could watch the twins for 2 days so I could pick up extra holiday shifts. The hospital was severely understaffed and the overtime pay would have helped with the twins' preschool tuition. "We've already committed to the Winter Music Festival," my father explained. "We bought tickets months ago. You should plan further ahead, Scarlett." I stopped asking after that. My colleagues with children had parents who begged to spend time with their grandchildren, but mine seemed to view grandparenting as an occasional obligation rather than a joy. The first signs of my health problems appeared about 8 months ago. I started experiencing occasional sharp pains in my upper abdomen after meals. Being in healthcare, I suspected gallbladder issues, but like many healthcare professionals, I minimized my own symptoms. I took antacids, adjusted my diet to avoid fatty foods, and kept pushing through my busy schedule. My colleague, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, noticed my discomfort during lunch one day. "Scarlett, that's the 3rd time you've winced while eating. What's going on?" I admitted I was having symptoms consistent with gallstones, but downplayed their severity. "I'll get it checked out when things slow down at work." Elena gave me her stern doctor look. "You wouldn't let a patient ignore these symptoms. Promise me you'll schedule an ultrasound this week." I did get the ultrasound, which confirmed multiple gallstones, but the gastroenterologist said that since my symptoms were intermittent, I could consider elective surgery when my schedule permitted. I put it off, telling myself I'd find time during the twins' summer break when arranging childcare would be easier. In our apartment building, Mrs. Jenkins, a kind widow in her 70s, occasionally helped with the twins for brief periods, but her arthritis limited how much she could do. My co-worker Amanda had children similar in age to mine and sometimes invited us for play dates or offered to take the twins when I had an evening shift. But neither was in a position to provide multiple days of childcare, especially on short notice. I tried to build my village where I could. The twins' kindergarten teacher, Ms. Parker, became a valuable ally, keeping them in after-school care when I was running late. The parents of Lucas's best friend Jacob sometimes included my son in weekend activities. Lily's dance instructor let her attend extra classes at a discount when I needed to work Saturday mornings. It was a patchwork system that functioned but had little room for emergencies. I knew this was precarious, but like many single parents, I lived in constant hope that nothing would go seriously wrong. The pain attacks gradually increased in frequency and intensity. 2 weeks before my surgery, I had an episode so severe, I nearly passed out in the hospital cafeteria. Elena found me leaning against the wall, breathing through clenched teeth. "That's it," she said, helping me to a chair. "You need to schedule that surgery now before this becomes an emergency." I promised I would. But first, I needed to figure out childcare for the twins. I thought I had time to make arrangements to carefully plan every detail, as I always did. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday morning when everything fell apart. I was doing rounds with a pediatric resident when a wave of pain unlike anything I'd experienced before hit me. It started in my upper abdomen and radiated through my back so intense that I couldn't speak or stand upright. The resident grabbed my arm as I doubled over my clipboard, clattering to the floor. Dr. Thompson, what's wrong?" I couldn't answer. The pain was all-consuming, accompanied by nausea and cold sweat. Someone called a code, and within moments I was surrounded by colleagues being transferred from provider to patient in a surreal blur of activity. In the ER, Dr. Palmer, the attending physician, quickly assessed my condition. "Your gallbladder is severely inflamed, Scarlett. The ultrasound shows acute cholecystitis with signs of possible perforation. We need to operate immediately." Through waves of pain, dulled only slightly by medication, I tried to focus on his words. "The surgery itself is straightforward, Shame," he continued, "but given the level of inflammation, you'll need to remain hospitalized for at least 3 to 4 days afterward. We'll need to administer IV antibiotics and monitor for complications." 4 days in the hospital. The reality hit me harder than the pain. Who would take care of Lily and Lucas? They had never been without me for more than a single night. "I can't," I gasped, trying to sit up despite the pain. "My twins. I don't have anyone to watch them for that long." Dr. Palmer's expression softened with concern. "Is there anyone you can call family nearby?" "The surgery really can't wait, Scarlett. Your gallbladder could rupture." As they prepared me for surgery, a nurse handed me my cell phone. "Make your calls now," she advised gently. "Once we take you to pre-op, you won't be able to use your phone." With trembling fingers, I called my parents. Despite everything, they were still my parents, and surely in a true emergency, they would help. The phone rang several times before my mother answered with a distracted, "Hello, Mum," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm in the emergency room. I need emergency gallbladder surgery." There was a pause before she responded. "Oh dear, when is the surgery scheduled?" "Now, today. They're prepping me already. Mum, I need someone to take Lily and Lucas. The doctor says I'll be in the hospital for at least 3 or 4 days. Another pause longer this time. I could hear muffled voices in the background, my mother covering the phone to speak to someone else. My father, presumably. "Scarlett, this is very sudden," she finally said, her voice tight. "Your father and I have tickets for the Resonators concert tonight. They're performing their farewell tour, and these tickets cost over $500 each. We've been planning this for months." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mum, I'm having emergency surgery. I could die if my gallbladder ruptures. I need someone to take care of my children." "You always exaggerate, Scarlett," she sighed. "No one dies from gallbladder surgery these days." I heard my father's voice getting louder in the background, then the sound of the phone changing hands. "Scarlett," my father's voice was firm. "This is very inconvenient timing. We have plans that can't be changed. Surely there's someone else you can call." "Dad, there isn't anyone else," I pleaded, tears of pain and desperation rolling down my cheeks. "You're their grandparents. They're your only grandchildren. Now listen." His voice took on the lecturing tone I remembered from childhood. "We love the twins, but you chose to be a mother. You can't expect everyone else to drop everything because you have a medical issue. You've become quite a burden with all these expectations." The word burden hit me like a physical blow. A burden. That's how they saw me. How they saw their grandchildren. "William, give me the phone." My mother's voice cut in. She came back on the line. "Scarlett, we sympathize with your situation, but you need to figure this out yourself. Call one of those babysitting services or something. We really can't miss this concert." A concert is more important than your daughter's health, than your grandchildren's well-being. My voice rose despite the pain. Don't be so dramatic, she replied coldly. You've always been this way, making everything about you. We have a life too, you know. You need to respect that. The conversation deteriorated further with accusations flying from both sides. Years of pent-up resentment and disappointment spilled out until my father finally snapped. If you were a more organised parent, you'd have backup arrangements for emergencies instead of trying to guilt us. When I hung up, I was shaking with anger, hurt, and fear. The nurse, who had been discreetly arranging instruments nearby, gave me a tissue and a gentle pat on the shoulder. With growing desperation, I scrolled through my contacts. Amanda was out of town visiting her mother. Mrs. Jenkins had recently fallen and couldn't possibly manage active 5-year-olds. I called several other hospital colleagues with children, but everyone was working or had other commitments. I even tried calling the twins' school to see if any teachers might help, but it was too much to ask on such short notice. As the pre-op medications began to take effect, making my thoughts fuzzy around the edges, the full horror of my situation sank in. I was about to have surgery with no plan for my children. They were still at school, expecting me to pick them up in 3 hours. What would happen when I didn't show up? The pain in my abdomen was now matched by the ache in my chest. I'd never felt so alone or so terrified. A different nurse came in to check my vitals, frowning at my elevated heart rate and blood pressure. Is there someone we should call for you? She asked kindly. There's no one, I whispered the words, catching painfully in my throat. Dr. Eleanor Rodriguez walked in, then already dressed in scrubs for her shift. She took one look at my face and sat down beside me. Scarlett? What's wrong, besides the obvious gallbladder situation? The dam broke. Through sobs and gasps of pain, I explained my impossible situation, my parents' refusal, the lack of options for the twins, the overwhelming fear of what would happen to my children. Eleanor's expression shifted from concern to determination. I'll take them tonight, she said firmly. What? No, I can't ask you to do that, I protested weakly. You didn't ask, I offered. She squeezed my hand. Carlos and I can manage for tonight, and we'll figure out tomorrow when it comes. The twins know me, they've been to our house for your birthday dinner. But your shift's your own kids? Let me worry about that. I'll call Carlos right now and have him pick up the twins from school. Do you have a house key they can use to get some of their things? The relief was so overwhelming I could barely speak. I fumbled in my purse for my keys and gave her instructions for finding the twins' favourite stuffed animals, blankets and clothes. Their routine. I started trying to remember through the haze of pain and medication what she would need to know. Write it down if you can, or just text me later, Elena assured me. Kids are adaptable. We'll make it work. As they prepared to wheel me to surgery, Eleanor leaned down and hugged me gently. You're not alone, Scarlett. Not everyone has family like your parents. But that doesn't mean you don't have family. We'll figure this out together. With Eleanor's promise to care for the twins that night, the hospital staff moved quickly to prepare me for surgery. The nurse helped me pack the few personal items I had into a hospital bag, carefully setting aside my phone, so I could make a quick call to the twins before the operation. Despite my growing drowsiness from the pre-surgical medications, I needed to explain to my children what was happening. Eleanor dialed the number for her husband Carlos, who was already on his way to pick up Lily and Lucas from school. Mommy, Lily's small voice came through the speaker, a mixture of confusion and excitement. Mr. Carlos said you're sick and we're having a sleepover at Eleanor's house. Is that true? I forced steadiness into my voice. Yes, baby. Mommy has a tummy ache that the doctors need to fix. I have to stay at the hospital for a few days, but you and Lucas will have a fun time with Eleanor and her family. Are you going to die? Lucas asked bluntly, his voice wobbling. My heart clenched. No, sweetheart. I promise I'm not going to die. The doctors are going to make me all better, but I need to rest at the hospital afterward. Why can't we stay with Grandma and Grandpa? Lily asked innocently. Their house has the big backyard with the swing. The question stabbed like a physical pain. Grandma and Grandpa have plans tonight, honey. They can't change them. Is it another concert? Lucas asked, his voice dropping with disappointment. They always go to concerts. Yes, it's a concert, I admitted, not wanting to lie. But Elena and Carlos will take good care of you until I'm better. Will you call us tomorrow? Lily asked. Every day, I promised. And maybe we can do video calls too so I can see your faces. Okay, Lucas said reluctantly. I'll take care of Lily, Mom. Don't worry. Even through my pain and medication haze, I smiled at my little boy trying to be so brave. Thank you, buddy. I love you both so much. Love you too, eh? They chorused before the call ended. Tears slid down my temples as the orderlies came to transport me to the operating room. Eleanor squeezed my hand one more time. I'll send you updates and pictures, she promised. Just focus on getting better. As they wheeled me down the corridor, I checked my phone one last time. There was a text message from my mother. At the venue now. Great seats. Hope your surgery goes well. Attached was a selfie of my parents smiling widely, cocktails in hand, in what looked like a VIP section. No mention of the twins, no questions about arrangements. Just, hope your surgery goes well, as an afterthought to their excitement about the concert. I handed my phone to the nurse, unable to look at it anymore. In the bright lights of the operating room, as the anesthesiologist prepared to put me under my mind, flashed back to my 8th grade piano recital. I had practiced for months, earning a solo spot in the showcase. My parents had promised to attend, but a last-minute opportunity for box seats at the symphony had come up. I performed to an audience missing the only faces I was looking for. Just relax and count backward from 10, the anesthesiologist instructed, placing the mask over my face. I made it to 7 before darkness claimed me. The next thing I remember is the recovery room, the persistent beep of monitors and the muffled sounds of medical staff moving around. My throat felt raw from the breathing tube, and a dull throbbing pain radiated from my abdomen despite the pain medication. As consciousness slowly returned, so did the awareness of my complete aloneness. No anxious spouse pacing the waiting room, no parents eager for updates, just medical colleagues who were now shifting awkwardly between their professional roles and personal concern for a co-worker. "Welcome back," said Nurse Sandra, a woman I knew from pediatrics, who must have transferred to recovery duty that day. "Dr. Palmer said everything went well. Your gallbladder was severely inflamed, but they got it out without complications. The twins," I croaked my first coherent thought. "Dr. Rodriguez sent a message that they're settled in at her house. She'll bring your phone by later so you can video chat with them." I nodded, grateful but exhausted. The recovery room was full of other patients with family members being allowed in briefly to see their loved ones. I closed my eyes, not wanting to witness what I didn't have. Sandra seemed to sense this. She pulled the privacy curtain around my bed and sat beside me for a moment, going beyond her professional duties. "I was a single mum too," she shared quietly. 3 kids and my family lived across the country. It's hard when there's no one to show up for you. "How did you do it?" I whispered. "One day at a time," she smiled. "And I learned to accept help from unexpected places. People want to help more than you think." Later that night, in my hospital room, I checked my phone again. Several text messages from Eleanor showed the twins having dinner with her family playing board games, and finally tucked into sleeping bags in her living room, their faces peaceful in sleep. Nothing more from my parents except an Instagram notification. They had posted several pictures from the concert with captions like, "Best night ever," and "Worth every penny." No mention of their daughter in surgery or their grandchildren. It was as if we didn't exist in their world. The physical pain of surgery was significant, but it couldn't compare to the emotional wound that had been torn open. I drifted in and out of sleep that night, nurses checking my vitals regularly, but no family keeping vigil at my bedside. When morning came, I felt utterly depleted, both physically and emotionally. The surgeon visited early, explaining that the operation had revealed more inflammation than expected. "We had to be quite aggressive with the removal," Dr. Palmer explained. "You'll need to stay at least 4 days, possibly 5, to ensure there's no infection developing." 5 days. The temporary solution of Elena taking the twins suddenly seemed woefully inadequate. What would I do for the rest of my hospital stay? The worry must have shown on my face. "Is there something else concerning you, Scarlett?" Dr. Palmer asked gently. "It's childcare," I admitted. "I don't have anyone who can take my twins for that long." He nodded thoughtfully. "Let's get the hospital social worker to visit you today. They might have resources that could help." As he left, I stared out the window at the cloudy Portland morning, feeling as grey and heavy as the sky. In that moment of despair, there was a soft knock at my door. To my surprise, Mrs. Jenkins, my elderly neighbour, shuffled in slowly with her walker, a small vase of daisies clutched carefully in one hand. "Mrs. Jenkins, how did you get here?" I asked, genuinely confused. With her mobility issues, she rarely left our apartment building. "Oh, Elena's husband drove me," she smiled, placing the flowers on my bedside table. "And don't you worry about those beautiful children of yours. We've got it all arranged." "Arranged? What do you mean?" Mrs. Jenkins sat carefully in the visitor's chair, her eyes twinkling with purpose. despite her frail appearance. When Elena realized you'd be here for several days, she started making calls. We've set up what we're calling Operation Scarlet. Everyone's taking shifts to help with the twins. When Mrs. Jenkins mentioned Operation Scarlet, I couldn't imagine what she meant. As she explained further, I realized the extraordinary thing that was happening. My community was rallying around us in ways I never could have anticipated. Elena and her family are taking the twins for the first 2 days, Mrs. Jenkins detailed, pulling out a neatly written schedule from her purse. Then Amanda's coming back early from her trip to take over for the next 2 days. Everyone's pitching in hours where they can. I stared at the paper in disbelief. It was a meticulously organised childcare schedule, spanning 5 days with names of people I knew from work, the twins' school and our apartment building. But how? Why would everyone do this? I asked, my voice breaking. Mrs. Jenkins patted my hand. Because that's what community does, dear. When Elena explained your situation, everyone wanted to help. You've touched more lives than you realize. As she continued explaining the arrangements, I learned that the Rodriguez family had already taken the twins for a second night with Elena's children, thrilled to have bonus siblings to play with. Carlos had taken the day off work to manage all 4 children while Elena worked her shift. Amanda was cutting her visit to her mother short by 2 days to come back and take the twins for the weekend. She had already coordinated with other parents from the twins' kindergarten class to arrange playdates and activities to keep them occupied. For transportation needs, a rotation of hospital staff had volunteered to drive the twins between locations. The parents from Lucas's soccer team had created a meal train delivering dinners to whoever was hosting the children that day. Most surprisingly, Mrs. Jenkins herself was coordinating everything despite her arthritis and limited mobility. I may not be able to chase after 5-year-olds anymore, she chuckled, but I can still use a telephone and keep everyone organised. Tears welled in my eyes. I don't know how I'll ever repay everyone. You already have, she replied simply. You've been the first to offer help whenever anyone else needed it. Now it's your turn to receive. Later that morning, Eleanor brought my phone during her break, allowing me to video call with Lily and Lucas. Their faces filled the screen, both talking excitedly over each other about their sleepover adventure. We made pancakes with chocolate chips, Lucas exclaimed. And I helped Maria with her homework, Lily added proudly, referring to Elena's daughter. Are you feeling better, Mommy? Lucas asked, his expression turning serious. Does your tummy still hurt? It's getting better. I assured them, hiding the pain I still felt. The doctors are taking good care of me. When can you come home? Lily asked, her lower lip trembling slightly. In a few more days, sweetheart. But you're going to have so much fun with everyone until then. It'll be like one big adventure. They seemed satisfied with this explanation, quickly distracted by Carlos announcing it was time for ice cream. I watched their excited faces disappear from view, grateful they were being well cared for but aching to hold them. Eleanor stayed behind for a moment. They're doing great, Scarlett. Really. Kids are resilient. Thank you isn't enough, I whispered. You'd do the same for any of us, she replied with certainty. Oh, and I forgot to mention the pediatric unit took up a collection to help with any extra expenses. People just started throwing in cash when they heard what happened. She handed me an envelope that I later discovered contained over $500, along with a card signed by dozens of co-workers, many of whom I only knew in passing. That afternoon, while scrolling through social media during a particularly painful bout of post-surgical discomfort, I came across another post from my parents. They were at an upscale brunch spot, mimosas raised to the camera, with the caption, "Perfect morning after the concert of a lifetime. Blessed, living our best life." I stared at their smiling faces, so disconnected from the reality of their daughter lying in a hospital bed, their grandchildren being cared for by virtual strangers. The contrast between their indifference and the kindness of my colleagues and neighbours was staggering. Yet strangely, I felt something shift inside me. The pain of their rejection was still there, but alongside it grew something new, a sense of liberation. All these years I'd been seeking their approval, their help, their love, measuring myself against their impossible standards. Perhaps it was time to finally accept what had always been true. They would never be the parents or grandparents I wished they were. My physical recovery was progressing well, though not without challenges. On the 3rd day, I developed a low-grade fever that concerned my doctors enough to order additional antibiotics. This complication extended my hospital stay to the full 5 days Dr. Palmer had warned might be necessary. Throughout this time, my makeshift support network continued to function flawlessly. Mrs. Jenkins visited daily, updating me on the twins' activities, and showing me pictures sent by their various caretakers. The Rodriguez children had taught Lily and Lucas to play Go Fish. Amanda had taken them to the Children's Museum. The kindergarten teacher had included them in a weekend playgroup at a local park. Through it all, not once did my parents call to check on me or the twins. Their social media continued to show their carefree activities, a wine tasting the day after the concert, a golf game dinner with friends. It was as if the emergency surgery of their only child was too inconvenient to acknowledge. By my 4th day in the hospital, I had begun to formulate a plan for when I returned home. The experience had forced me to see clearly what I had perhaps always known, but never fully accepted. My relationship with my parents needed firm boundaries if I was going to protect myself and my children from future pain. As I contemplated what those boundaries might look like, I received an unexpected gift from the hospital staff, a professionally bound photo album titled Scarlett's Village. Inside were dozens of pictures of hospital colleagues, neighbours and friends from the twins' school, each holding a handwritten sign with messages like, "We're here for you, and your village has your back." The final pages were filled with photos of the twins' adventure while I was hospitalised, baking cookies with Amanda building a fort in Elena's living room, planting flowers with Mrs. Jenkins supervising from her chair. Their smiling faces told me they were thriving despite the disruption to their routine. Looking at those images, I realised that while my blood family had failed me, I had somehow built a chosen family without even realising it. As I prepared to go home, I felt both physically weaker and emotionally stronger than when I had arrived. 5 days after my emergency surgery, I was finally cleared to go home. My colleague Dr. Patel, who had been monitoring my recovery, gave me detailed instructions for wound care and activity restrictions. No lifting anything heavier than a gallon of milk for at least 2 weeks, he emphasized, knowing I had young children. That means no picking up the twins Scarlett. I'm serious. Elena had arranged to drive me home and had taken the afternoon off to help get me settled. When we pulled up to my apartment building, I was stunned to see colourful welcome home banners hanging from my balcony and a small crowd gathered by the entrance. "What's all this?" I asked, overwhelmed by the display. "Just a few people who wanted to welcome you back." Elena smiled, helping me out of the car. Mrs. Jenkins was there in her wheelchair, looking like a proud general surveying her troops. Amanda stood with her own children, plus my twins, who broke away from the group the moment they saw me. "Mommy!" They shouted in unison, running toward me. I knelt, carefully mindful of my incision, and opened my arms. They crashed into me with the unrestrained enthusiasm only 5-year-olds possess. I bit my lip against the pain, but wouldn't have traded that embrace for anything. "Remember gentle with Mommy," Amanda reminded them. "She's still healing." The twins stepped back, suddenly serious, as they examined me. "Does your owie still hurt?" Lily asked, reaching tentatively toward my abdomen. "A little," I admitted, "but it's getting better every day. We made you welcome home pictures," Lucas announced. "And cookies, and Mrs. Jenkins taught us to make chicken soup, but Carlos did the hot parts." Our apartment had been transformed. It was spotlessly clean, with vases of flowers on every surface. The refrigerator was stocked with labelled meals, each with reheating instructions attached. A basket of easily opened snacks sat on the counter at child height, clearly placed there for the twins to access independently. On the coffee table was a stack of Get Well cards, many handmade by the twins' classmates. Beside them lay a printed schedule for the next 2 weeks, detailing who would be coming by to help with school drop-offs and pickups, meal preparation, and light housekeeping. "We know you can't lift much right now," Eleanor explained, "so we've arranged for continuing help until you're fully recovered." 2 days later, as I sat on the sofa supervising while the twins built an elaborate block city on the living room floor, the doorbell rang. Lucas jumped up to peek through the window. "It's Grandma and Grandpa!" he exclaimed, running to open the door before I could stop him. My parents walked in, bearing gift bags and wearing the slightly uncomfortable expressions of people making an obligatory visit. My mother's eyes widened slightly as she took in the flowers and cards still decorating the apartment. "You look better than I expected," she said, by way of greeting, leaning in for an ear kiss near my cheek. "We brought some things for the children." The twins accepted their gifts with polite thank yous, quickly returning to their block city after extracting toy cars from the bags. My father settled uncomfortably in an armchair, while my mother perched beside me on the sofa. "We would have come sooner, but we had tickets to the symphony," my mother explained, as if this was perfectly reasonable. "How are you feeling?" "I'm recovering," I said neutrally. The surgery was more complicated than expected. Well, gallbladder surgery is quite routine these days, my father commented dismissively. Your mother had hers out 10 years ago and was back on the tennis court in a week. I took a deep breath, feeling the familiar anger rising. The twins were absorbed in their play, talking quietly to each other in the made-up language they sometimes shared. Would you like some coffee? A chemise? I offered, mainly to buy myself time to steady my emotions. I'll make it, my mother said, rising quickly. You shouldn't be getting up much. In the kitchen, she began opening cupboards looking for coffee supplies, while my father inspected the get well cards on the table. You seem to have had quite a lot of visitors, he observed. Yes, I replied simply. People have been very kind. My mother returned with 3 cups of coffee, setting them carefully on coasters. So who ended up watching the twins while you were in the hospital? She asked casually, as if inquiring about a minor detail. The audacity of the question after their complete abandonment during my crisis ignited something in me. I set my coffee cup down with deliberate care. Various people stepped up, I said evenly. Friends, colleagues, neighbours, people who care about us. Well, that's nice, my mother said vaguely. Children are so adaptable, aren't they? I'm sure they managed fine. They did manage, I agreed, my voice tightening despite my efforts to remain calm. No thanks to their grandparents. A tense silence fell. My father cleared his throat. Now, Scarlett, there's no need to be dramatic. We explained that we had prior commitments. Prior commitments, I repeated. You mean the concert? It wasn't just any concert, my mother defended. It was the Resonators' farewell tour. Those tickets were impossible to get. I stared at her, truly seeing her for perhaps the first time in my adult life. More impossible than finding someone to care for your grandchildren during a medical emergency. You're overreacting, my father said, his tone hardening. You found arrangements, didn't you? Everything worked out fine. No thanks to you, I repeated, my voice low but firm. Do you have any idea what it felt like to be lying in pre-op in excruciating pain, knowing my children had nowhere to go because their grandparents chose a concert over them? We knew you'd figure something out, my mother said dismissively. You always do. You're very resourceful. That's not the point. I felt my control slipping. You're their grandparents. You live 30 minutes away. You're retired with flexible schedules. If you can't help during a literal medical emergency, when would you ever help? My father's face reddened. We are not on call for your childcare needs, Scarlett. We have our own lives. Just because you chose to be a single mother doesn't make your children our responsibility. I never said they were your responsibility, I countered, conscious of keeping my voice down for the twins' sake. But most grandparents actually want to be involved in their grandchildren's lives. Most grandparents would drop everything for a family emergency. There you go again, making us feel guilty because we don't conform to your idea of what grandparents should be, my mother sighed theatrically. We love the children, but we're not going to apologize for having our own priorities. And what exactly are those priorities, Mom? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like literally anything is more important to you than your family. That's unfair, she protested. We've always supported you financially. Money isn't the same as being present. I said the truth I'd always known, finally finding voice. Money doesn't comfort scared children or help a daughter in crisis. My father stood abruptly. I won't sit here and be lectured about our parenting or grandparenting. You've always been too sensitive, Scarlett, taking everything personally. This was personal, I exclaimed, finally losing my composure. You called me a burden when I was facing emergency surgery. Do you have any idea how that felt? The twins had stopped playing their small faces, turning toward us with concern. Lucas stood up, protective as always, and moved closer to me. Mommy, are you okay? He asked, his small hand resting on my knee. I took a deep breath, forcing a smile. I'm fine, sweetheart. Grandma and Grandpa were just leaving. My mother's mouth fell open. Leaving? But we just got here. I think it's best, I said firmly. I'm still recovering, and this conversation isn't helpful to that process. My father was already reaching for his coat. Come on, Margaret. Clearly Scarlett isn't in a reasonable mood today. William, my mother protested weakly, but she stood as well. The twins watched in confusion as their grandparents made stilted goodbyes, promising to bring better gifts, when Mommy is feeling more herself. My father didn't look at me as they left, while my mother gave me a reproachful glance that I recognized from childhood. I had disappointed her again. When the door closed behind them, Lily climbed carefully onto the sofa beside me. Why was everybody mad? She asked. I pulled her close, gesturing for Lucas to join us on my other side. Sometimes grown-ups disagree about important things. I explained, searching for words they could understand. Grandma and Grandpa have different ideas about family than Mommy does. They don't come to my soccer games, Lucas observed matter-of-factly. Amanda's mum comes even though she's not my grandma. And they forgot my birthday last year, Lily added. They sent a present 2 weeks later, out of the mouths of babes. They had noticed far more than I'd realised. Are they mad at us? Lucas asked, his voice small. No, sweetheart. I assured him, hugging them both carefully. They love you in their own way. They just don't always know how to show it. That night, after the twins were asleep, I sat alone in the dim light of my living room and allowed myself to really feel the pain of the day's confrontation. The surgery incision throbbed, but the wound my parents had reopened ached far deeper. For years, I had made excuses for them, accepted their emotional distance as just their way. I had continued seeking their approval, hoping that becoming a mother myself would somehow transform our relationship. But today had shown me clearly that nothing would change unless I changed my expectations and my boundaries. As I looked around at the evidence of care and community that filled my home, I made a decision. It was time to stop pouring energy into a relationship that consistently left me depleted. It was time to nurture the connections that actually nourished me and my children. With that resolution came an unexpected sense of peace. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but for the first time I could see it clearly. The 2 weeks of recovery after returning home became a time of profound transformation for me, not just physically, but emotionally and relationally as well. While my body slowly healed from the surgical trauma, I began the more complex process of healing the long-standing wounds in my family relationships. My parents made no contact after their abrupt departure from my apartment, no calls to check on my recovery, no messages asking about the twins. Their silence spoke volumes about their priorities and their perception of our conflict. At first, I found myself checking my phone frequently, conditioned by years of seeking their approval. But as days passed without communication, something unexpected happened. I felt a growing sense of relief rather than abandonment. During a particularly restless night, when post-surgical discomfort kept me awake, I scrolled through social media and discovered that my parents had posted photos from another concert, captioned with, "Making the most of our freedom years." The casual cruelty of this public enjoyment, while I was still recovering, hit me hard. But it also crystallized something I had been struggling to accept. They were showing me exactly who they were and what they valued. With this clarity came decision. After much thought, I reached out to Dr. Winters, a therapist several colleagues had recommended. During our first video session, I poured out the history of my relationship with my parents, from my childhood, striving for approval, to the recent abandonment during my medical crisis. It sounds like you've spent a lifetime adapting to their needs and priorities, Dr. Winters observed gently. What would it look like to create boundaries that protect you and your children? That question became the foundation for our ongoing work together. What would healthy boundaries look like? How could I maintain some relationship with my parents for my children's sake, without subjecting myself to continued hurt? Over several sessions, we explored my patterns of seeking validation from people unwilling or unable to provide it. Dr. Winters helped me see how I had recreated some of these dynamics in other relationships, including my failed marriage. Boundaries aren't punishments, she explained. They're structures that allow healthy relationships to develop. When we don't have them, we end up resentful and exhausted. With her guidance, I began drafting a letter to my parents, not as an accusation, but as a clear statement of what I needed moving forward. I wrote and rewrote it many times, working to remove blame while being honest about the impact of their choices. Meanwhile, my physical recovery progressed steadily. The community support continued, though I gradually needed less help as my strength returned. Amanda's teenage daughter came after school to help with the twins' bath time when I still couldn't lift them in and out of the tub. Mrs. Jenkins organised a weekly rotation of neighbours bringing dinners. Eleanor checked my incision regularly, ensuring it was healing properly. During this time, I also started working on a special project. Using photos everyone had shared with me, I created a family photo album titled Our Village. It documented not only the care the twins had received during my hospitalisation, but also included pictures from the past several years showing the web of relationships we had built. Birthday parties, school events, hospital picnics, neighbourhood gatherings. Looking through these images, I realised we had been creating family all along, not through blood, but through consistent care and presence. The album became a tangible reminder that family is defined by actions, not merely genetics. Another important step in my recovery journey involved meeting with a lawyer to update my will and establish guardianship arrangements for the twins. Previously, despite their limited involvement, I had named my parents as guardians simply because they were family. Now I made the decision to designate Eleanor and Carlos as primary guardians with Amanda as backup. "Are you sure about this?" Elena asked when I told her. "It's a huge responsibility." "I've never been more sure of anything," I told her truthfully. "You've shown what real family means." As my physical strength returned and I prepared to go back to work, I finalized my letter to my parents and sent it via email, keeping a copy for myself as Dr. Winters had suggested. In it, I outlined clear expectations, no unannounced visits, consistent commitment to planned time with the twins, respect for my parenting decisions, and acknowledgement of hurtful behaviors before moving forward. I ended with, "I hope we can build a healthier relationship that honors all of our needs. The twins deserve grandparents who are present and reliable, and I deserve to be treated with basic respect and consideration. The choice of whether that happens is now in your hands." 3 days after sending the letter, my parents arrived unannounced at our apartment on a Saturday morning. The twins were still in pajamas, and I was making pancakes when the doorbell rang. Lucas ran to peer through the window. "It's Grandma and Grandpa again," he announced, less excited than the last time. I took a deep breath, turned off the stove, and went to answer the door. My mother pushed past me into the apartment, my father following with a stern expression. "What is the meaning of this email?" my mother demanded without preamble. "Conditions for seeing our own grandchildren. This is outrageous, Scarlett." I closed the door calmly. "Lily, Lucas, please go play in your room for a few minutes while I talk to Grandma and Grandpa." The twins, sensing tension, quickly retreated to their bedroom. I turned to face my parents. "I meant everything I said in that email," I stated firmly. "If you want to be part of our lives, there need to be some changes." "Changes?" my father scoffed. "You're the one who needs to change your attitude. We are your parents. You don't get to dictate terms to us." "Actually, I do," I replied, surprising myself with my steady voice. "I'm an adult and the mother of these children. I get to decide what kind of relationships we maintain and with whom." My mother's face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous. We have rights as grandparents." "This isn't about rights," I explained, maintaining my composure. "It's about creating healthy relationships, the kind where people can count on each other during emergencies." "You're still upset about that concert," my father said dismissively. "You need to let that go. We've explained our position." "The concert was just one example of a pattern," I replied. "And yes, I am still hurt by your choice, but this is about moving forward, not dwelling on the past. Moving forward on your terms my mother said bitterly, "with your rules, with boundaries that protect me and my children from being repeatedly disappointed and hurt," I corrected. "I'm not asking for anything unreasonable." My father's expression hardened. "And if we refuse these boundaries of yours, what then?" I had anticipated this question and had prepared my answer with Dr. Winters' help. "Then we'll have much less contact. I won't subject myself or my children to relationships that cause pain and insecurity." "You would keep our grandchildren from us." My mother's voice rose dramatically. "I would protect them from the experience of being repeatedly treated as an afterthought," I clarified. "But that's not what I want. I want you to be meaningful parts of their lives, which means being reliable and present." "This is emotional blackmail," my father declared. "No," I countered calmly. "It's clarity about what we need. You're free to choose whether you want to meet those needs." My mother's eyes filled with tears, a rare display of emotion. "After everything we've done for you, the money we've given you for the twins' education fund, the gifts." "I appreciate the financial support," I acknowledged, "but money can't replace presence. The twins need grandparents who show up, not just send checks." "Well, perhaps those checks will stop if this is your attitude," my father threatened. I had expected this too, their ultimate leverage. To my surprise, I felt no panic at the prospect. "That's your choice," I said simply. "We'll manage either way." My calm response seemed to unbalance them. They had expected me to back down, to apologize, to return to the familiar pattern of seeking their approval at any cost. "I think you should leave now," I continued. "We can talk again when you've had time to consider what I've said." The twins and I were in the middle of making breakfast. "This isn't over, Scarlett," my father warned as they moved toward the door. "I hope not," I replied sincerely. "I hope it's just the beginning of something better." After they left, I stood in the quiet apartment, surprised by my own steadiness. For the first time in my relationship with my parents, I had spoken my truth without apology and held firm against their attempts to dismiss and minimize. The twins emerged cautiously from their room. "Are you fighting with Grandma and Grandpa?" Lily asked. I knelt to their level. "Not fighting exactly. We're figuring out some grown-up things about how we want to be a family together. Sometimes that's complicated." "Are they mad?" Lucas asked. "They're feeling lots of things right now," I explained honestly. "But that's not something you need to worry about. Now who wants to finish making those pancakes?" As we returned to our Saturday morning routine, I realized something profound had shifted. In standing up for myself and my children, I had accessed a strength I hadn't known I possessed. Whatever happened next with my parents, I knew we would be okay. In the weeks that followed, my parents maintained their distance, though my mother occasionally sent texts asking about the twins with a formality that suggested she was documenting her attempts at contact. I responded politely but didn't extend invitations or make additional efforts to bridge the gap. Meanwhile, our village continued to flourish. The twins' birthday approached, and for the first time I planned a celebration without considering my parents' schedule or preferences. We held a backyard party at Elena's house with a superhero theme the twins had chosen. Children from their kindergarten class came along with hospital friends, and their families, neighborhood children, and Mrs. Jenkins presiding like a beloved great-grandmother. Looking around at the joyful gathering, I realized we had created something beautiful and authentic, a chosen family bound by love and consistent care rather than obligation. The absence of my parents was noticeable only to me, and even then, it felt more like relief than loss. As I continued sessions with Dr. Winters, I gradually released the need for my parents' approval or understanding. The work wasn't easy or linear, but each small step brought greater peace and clarity. "Healing doesn't mean the damage never existed," Dr. Winters told me during one particularly difficult session. "It means the damage no longer controls our lives." With that wisdom guiding me, I focused on building the life and family my children and I deserved one day at a time. 6 months after my emergency surgery, life had settled into a new rhythm that felt both familiar and profoundly different. Physically, I had fully recovered with only a small scar remaining as evidence of the medical crisis that had catalyzed so much change. Emotionally, the transformation was far more significant. My relationship with my parents had undergone a painful but necessary evolution. After their angry departure from my apartment that day, they maintained their distance for nearly 3 weeks, testing whether my resolve would weaken. When I didn't reach out with apologies or concessions, my mother finally sent a text message. "The twins' school play is next Friday according to their online calendar. Will you be saving seats for us?" It was a small olive branch, notable for what it didn't include. No acknowledgement of our conflict, no response to my boundaries, just an assumption that life would continue as before. After consulting with Dr. Winters, I responded with gentle firmness. "The play starts at 7 p.m. If you'd like to attend, please let me know by Wednesday so I can save appropriate seats. Also, I'm still hoping we can discuss the email I sent about building a healthier relationship moving forward." My mother's reply was brief. "We'll be there. We can talk after the play." That school performance became the first test of our new dynamic. My parents arrived exactly on time, not early enough to help the twins prepare as other grandparents were doing, but not late as they had been to previous events. They sat stiffly beside me, exchanging minimal pleasantries until the children appeared on stage. Watching their faces as Lily and Lucas performed their small roles, I caught glimpses of genuine pride and affection that had been easy to miss before. When Lucas spotted them in the audience, his face lit up with surprise and delight, waving enthusiastically from the stage. After the performance, as other families gathered for cookies and juice in the cafeteria, we found a quiet corner for the conversation I had requested. To my surprise, my father spoke first. "We've been thinking about what you said," he began awkwardly, "about being more present." My mother nodded. "We may have been less involved than we could have been." It wasn't a full acknowledgement of how their choices had affected us, but it was more reflection than I had ever heard from them before. "The twins were so happy to see you tonight," I offered, extending my own bridge. "They notice when you show up for them. We've missed some important moments," my mother admitted quietly. "There will be many more moments," I assured them, "if you want to be part of them." From that tentative beginning, we established what I came to think of as a supervised visitation schedule. My parents would commit to specific events and visits in advance, with clear expectations about arrival times and duration. I no longer assumed they would help in emergencies, but created other safety nets instead. Our first family therapy session 3 weeks later was uncomfortable but revealing. The therapist, Dr. Reyes, gently guided my parents through an exploration of their own upbringing. For the first time, I heard stories about my grandmother's emotional coldness and my grandfather's workaholic tendencies that had shaped my father's understanding of family. We weren't raised to be demonstrative, my mother explained defensively. In our families, providing financially was how you showed love. That's valid, Doctor. Reyes acknowledged, but different generations often have different needs. Understanding those differences is key to adapting family relationships. Progress was slow and inconsistent. My parents still missed commitments, occasionally still prioritized their social calendar over family events sometimes. The difference was that now there were consequences, missed opportunities weren't rescheduled immediately, and access to the twins required consistent effort. By Thanksgiving, 6 months post-surgery, we had reached a fragile new equilibrium. I hosted dinner at my apartment, inviting not only my parents, but also Elena's family, Amanda and her children, and Mrs. Jenkins. It was a blend of blood relatives and chosen family that initially confused my parents, but ultimately demonstrated the community we had built. Watching my father awkwardly but sincerely help Lucas build a Lego structure after dinner, I realized something important. I no longer needed them to be different than they were. My happiness and security no longer depended on their approval or attention. This freed me to accept the grandparents they could be imperfect, but trying without the desperate need for them to fulfill roles they weren't equipped for. This shift in perspective extended beyond my relationship with my parents. At work, I advocated for more flexible scheduling for all parents on staff, sharing my experience of community support during crisis. The hospital administration, seeing the retention benefits, implemented a pilot program for emergency childcare, subsidies that became a permanent policy. In our apartment building, I helped establish a cooperative childcare exchange, where parents took turns watching each other's children for date nights or appointments. Mrs. Jenkins became our coordinator, matching needs with availability from her apartment command centre, finding purpose in connecting neighbours. The most unexpected development came from the parents of Lucas's friend Jacob. David, Jacob's father, was also a single parent following his wife's death 2 years earlier. What began as playdates for our sons evolved into coffee conversations and eventually dinner dates once our childcare co-op was established. 6 months after my surgery, David invited me to the symphony, an irony not lost on me, given my parents' history of choosing concerts over family obligations. "I have tickets for Saturday," he said, "but only if you're comfortable with the childcare situation. We can reschedule if it's complicated." His consideration for my priorities touched me deeply. "Actually, my parents have asked to take the twins overnight," I told him. "They've been more involved lately." This was true. After witnessing the strong community we had built, my parents had slowly increased their efforts, perhaps motivated partly by not wanting to be outdone by strangers in their grandchildren's affections. We created a family expectations document that hung on my refrigerator, outlining commitments for grandparent involvement that included monthly overnight visits, weekly video calls, and attendance at important school events. My parents didn't always meet every expectation perfectly, but they were trying in ways they never had before. The most profound change, however, was within me. The crisis that could have broken me instead revealed strengths I hadn't known I possessed. I learned to accept help without shame, to build community intentionally, and to establish boundaries that protected what mattered most. On the 6-month anniversary of my surgery, I took the twins for ice cream after school. As they happily devoured their sundaes, I asked them a question that had been on my mind. "Who do you consider to be our family?" They looked confused by the question at first. Then Lucas began listing you and me and Lily, Grandma and Grandpa sometimes, Eleanor and Carlos and their kids, Mrs. Jenkins, Amanda and her kids, David and Jacob, Lily added with a knowing smile. She had noticed my growing relationship with Jacob's father. "That's a lot of people," I observed. Lucas nodded seriously. "We have a big family, not all the same last name, but still family." From the mouth of a 5-year-old came the wisdom I had been slowly learning. Family is defined by presence, reliability, and love, not by blood or obligation. As we walked home, hand in hand, I reflected on the unexpected blessings that had emerged from crisis. My parents weren't perfect, but they were making efforts I would never have believed possible before. My community had revealed itself to be stronger and more caring than I had realized. and I had found a resilience and clarity that transformed not just how others treated me, but how I valued myself. The lesson that came from my parents' initial rejection wasn't about their failings, but about my own worth and the extraordinary village that had been around me all along. Sometimes it takes our greatest betrayals to lead us to our greatest growth. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone's rejection unexpectedly led to positive change in your life? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and transformation. Remember that family isn't always defined by blood, and sometimes our greatest challenges reveal our greatest strengths. Thank you for listening, and may you recognize the village that surrounds you even in your most difficult moments.